Evening, everyone. I think the microphone's working. Is it working? Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. I am going to call to order the monthly November meeting of the Concord School Board. It is November 4th, 2019. It is 7 p.m. and thank you all for being here tonight. Our first agenda item is approval of the agenda, and I will entertain a motion to amend the agenda, or maybe I will make that motion, actually. I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to consider the resignation of Tom Sicca. So moved by me, seconded by Barb Higgins, and we will put that agenda item between agenda items 3 and 4. So after the student representatives report and before the update on the investigation. So I will ask for a vote on that motion, and then I'll ask for a vote to approve the agenda. So all in favor of amending the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I'll move that.
I'll second the motion.
So moved by Jim Richard, seconded by Chuck Fresh. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the amended agenda is approved. So our next agenda item is our student representatives report. And thank you for being here this evening. It's a little challenging in this venue, so I will pass you the microphone in a second so you can introduce yourselves. But welcome, we're really happy to have you here.
Good evening, members of the board. We're so happy to be joining you again this year. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gavin Brown. I was last year's junior class rep and this year's senior class rep. In my free time, I enjoy participating in the school's robotics and makerspace club, and I enjoy spending some of my weekends with the school's outdoor adventure class rope as a student leader. In school, my favorite subjects are physics and engineering, and after this year, I plan to go to college for mechanical engineering.
Hi, my name is Alex Richards, and I'm this year's junior class representative. So as a junior, this is my first year being a student representative, and I'm really looking forward to the year ahead. So outside of school, my main focus is dance. And within school, I enjoy a variety of classes. My favorite this year are likely AP Biology and AP Environmental Science. I also have leadership in general, several clubs such as Feminism Now, SOC Club, and EnviroCorps, as well as being a part of student government. And after high school, I am looking into studying political science or education.
Alice was one of Molly's first best friends.
Together, our goal this year is to bring forth and share with you the achievements of the students in the district, and also bring forth the voice of the student body and how we're working together with our administrators at the high school to make the school a better place.
So in light of this, we are happy to tell you about the founding of CHS Voice. This will be a small group of students who are interested in giving feedback and opinions on important changes that will be made within the district before they are put into place. So this group will work in pair with the CHS administration to view new policy changes and discuss current concerns of the student body. This information will then be given back to the school board to help us see the effects of these changes before they are put into place. We will also be participating in this group so that the school board will have a direct link to the group in order to clarify and expand on any information as necessary.
So now we'll be moving over to more current events that have gone on at the school. We'd like to extend a recognition to all those who made the new TV news system at the high school possible. For those of you who don't know what that is, it consisted of a number of TVs that were placed in high traffic areas around the school to broadcast school events and important reminders to students. This has been the first successful attempt at creating a consistent and widespread method of informing the students, and has been very helpful in informing students of deadlines and school-wide events. Thank you.
So in other recent current events at Concord High, many sports teams have finished their fall seasons on a high note. Field hockey played a great season, was just in the finals yesterday. against Wyndham, and the girls soccer team got a major victory last night as well against their previous rivals, Bedford High School, at a triple overtime match. And also state titles were won by both girls and boys cross country this year. It was the third year in a row for the boys and the first year for the girls since 2003, which was pretty exciting. So both qualified this past Saturday at MOCs, and they're headed on to New Orleans.
On Wednesday, October 16th, the high school held their school-wide PSAT testing day. They filled all their available seating with 300 participants as students used the opportunity to prepare themselves for the upcoming SAT test date this spring. This opportunity allows students to have equal access to this valuable practice test and helps students prepare for college in the future.
So the student body has been busy over the past 2 months, and many school-wide events have taken place. This includes freshman orientation, a club fair, we've had 2 college fairs, Spirit Week, homecoming, a blood drive, senior one acts, and many more. So these events are just some of the way our school celebrates our spirit and community, and we are excited to enjoy more events together throughout this year.
Throughout this school year, we look forward to working as the student representatives to not only share information about what is happening at Concord High, but also to work with students in CHS administration and the board. We hope to encourage and ensure students' opinion is being heard, and so that the CHS district community can continue to work together as one. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin and Alice. We are so excited to have you as board members, and I think you will add a tremendous amount to our conversations, and it's great to hear about all of the work that is going on at Concord High. So thank you. So our next agenda item is to consider the resignation of Concord High Principal Tom Sicca. And so first, I will look for a motion to unseal the portion of the minutes of the board's September 25th, 2019 non-public meeting regarding the motions and votes taken on Principal Sicca's employment with the Concord School District.
So moved.
Is there, I think there's someone who can read a motion.
Okay.
Yep.
One microphone's interesting. Motion to unseal the minutes. I move to unseal the portion of the minutes of the non-public session of September 25th,
2019 Concord School Board meeting regarding the motion and votes related to Principal Sicca's employment.
I'll second.
So moved by Chuck Crush, seconded by Pam Wicks. Is there any discussion? I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes on a 9-0 vote. And what I will do, as I did on Friday, is to read the portion of the minutes that we have just unsealed. So again, the board met in non-public session on September 25th, 2019. And at that meeting, the board voted unanimously on a roll call vote, 9-0, to terminate the employment of Mr. Sicca, moved by Ms. Patterson and seconded by Chuck Crush. The board also voted unanimously on a roll call vote, 9-0, to non-renew Mr. Sicca's contract, moved by Mr. Crush and seconded by Tom Crodo. Third, the board voted unanimously on a roll call vote, 9-0, to authorize the board president to work with council to draft and deliver a termination notice to Mr. Sicca, consistent with the findings of investigator Juna Perkins with respect to Mr. Sicca, moved by Ms. Patterson and seconded by Mr. Crodo. So those were the votes that were taken on September 25th. So now I will entertain a motion to approve an agreement releasing the Concord School District from its contract with Mr. Sicca and to accept his resignation.
That's me.
So I'm making a motion to approve the agreement
relieving the Concord School District of its obligations of its administrator's contract with Thomas M. Sicca, and to accept Principal Sicca's resignation effective November 1st.
Is there a second?
Second.
So moved by Tom Cordo, seconded by Danielle Smith.
By Barb. That was Barb.
Oh, it's Barb? I'm sorry.
I said it and you said it.
I thought I saw your lips. Danielle. Okay, seconded by Barb Higgins. And I'm going to call for a roll call vote again.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. So the motion passes 9-0. Okay. So that concludes that agenda item. So the next agenda item is an update on the investigation. So as I talked about at the last board meeting, the board's focus right now is really on 3 central areas. First, operating the school district. Second, ensuring student safety and responding to the situation with respect to Mr. Howie Leung, in terms both of considering personnel action and also taking actions to implement the findings of the investigator and creating cultural change within the district. And then third, regaining the trust of the community. Over the past month, we have made substantial progress. We also still have a lot of work to do in many areas. So with respect to operating the district, here are the areas where we've made progress. We have accepted the resignation of Superintendent Forston on Friday. This will enable the district to move forward under new leadership. We also just voted to accept the resignation of Principal Sicca tonight. On Friday, we also hired Dr. Bass, who is here. On November 1st, the board extended a conditional offer of employment as interim superintendent to Dr. Bass. He's here tonight. We expect that his first day of work will be November 7th, 2019, and we will be scheduling a time or more than one for the school community to meet and speak with Dr. Bass. He'll also offer some brief remarks later tonight at this meeting. We have also learned that Jack Dunn has obtained certification as a school business administrator from the State Department of Education, so congratulations, Jack. In addition, Larry Prince is nearly done with his audit of the certification status of all staff within the district, and so we should be receiving that report from Larry soon. In terms of work still to be done with respect to operating the district, we are looking to get clarity on Dr. Bassett's role as interim superintendent, exactly how that will work, given that he'll be working part-time. Which functionalities will he perform? Which functionalities will be performed by others? We had a little discussion of that on Friday. There will be further updates on that as he starts. But we're very excited and role within the district. We need to work on hiring an interim principal for Concord High School. We need to begin a search for a permanent superintendent and to begin the search for a permanent Concord High School principal. In terms of responding to the Howie Leung situation and working on student safety issues, we, on October 31st, 2019, released Part 2 of Inspector Perkins' report. There also has been ongoing work that's taking place with administrators in terms of conversations with community partners and ongoing conversations within the schools. So there have been meetings with the police chief regarding the MOU. There's ongoing communications and meetings with the police regarding procedures and practices, including a meeting with the entire district administrative team. There are ongoing training sessions on reporting on signs of abuse and neglect for staff and volunteers. These are being offered multiple times each month now at the central office. There was a meeting with Jane Stapleton, the director of the Prevention Innovation Research Center at UNH, with the Concord High administrative team. There was a meeting with Jen Pearson of the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire to develop a scope of work going forward with the Crisis Center to include curriculum work, and an opening meeting with school counselors, mental health clinicians within the district, which will be taking place this Friday. And we're hopeful that a new grant received recently by the Crisis Center may allow for an advocate to be present at Concord High School several days a week. There also has been ongoing work with the Concord High administrative team on their plan to gather input from students regarding policy 437 on employee-student relations, including aspects of the Perkins Report's recommendations within the next few weeks. This policy, we had been waiting to have a discussion at the Communications and Policy Committee. We were waiting to get that student input, and so that will be going forward at the November 20th Communication and Policy Committee meeting. There's continued work with all administrators on a plan to gather input from staff on that same policy within the next few weeks as well. There have also been meetings with DCYF supervisors, and that will continue with district staff. So those are some of the things that have been ongoing, and clearly that work will continue as we move forward to implement the findings. So the work still to be done on ensuring student safety and responding to the Howie Leung situation. We need to share the report findings with Dr. Bass once he is formally employed with the district. We need to have a strategic plan on Investigator Perkins' policy and practices recommendations, which we'll be working on in conjunction with the community. And we need to continue our policy discussions and adoption of policies. So in terms of the third area of regaining community trust, the board members have received a number of questions from the community, and thank you to the folks who sent us the list of questions yesterday. That is really helpful. Those questions relate to the procedures that the board uses to conduct its meetings and business, the nature, content, and public access to the report prepared by Attorney Perkins, and the board's intent to enact new policies and procedures for student safety. So we are still in the process of preparing written answers to these questions, and we will post those answers on our website in the near future. But we did want to give verbal answers to some of the most important questions, so I'll go through that now. These will be included when we post our questions and answers as well. So the first question is, why is Mr. Sicca still being paid by the district? When will this end? We got a partial answer to that question already tonight. Mr. Sicca was placed on paid leave by the board on September 27th, 2019. He has now resigned effective November 1st, 2019. By law, he had the right to remain in that status while the issues that led to his being placed on leave were resolved. Had the district and Mr. Sicca not resolved this matter by agreement, the terms of his contract and state law would have required a hearing before this board, the State Board of Education, and, if necessary, an appeal to the New Hampshire Supreme Court. Had Mr. Sicca elected to exercise those rights, this matter may have remained unresolved for a year or more. Why weren't board members aware Mr. Sicca was working, especially given that attorneys Perkins and Bennett were aware of it? Prior to September 27th, Mr. Sicca was supervised by Superintendent Forston, not by the board. Board members knew he was on voluntary leave, but not the details of what that entailed. While board members were aware he was performing some duties, the board would have had no reason to see his emails or to know the details of his duties, which were set by Superintendent Forston. Board members were surprised to learn that Mr. Sicca had been involved to the degree revealed by the emails recently reported on by the Concord Monitor. In order to maintain the independence of the investigation, there has been no contact between Attorney Perkins and board members, other than what is contained in the reports. Attorney Bennett's role is to be the liaison between Attorney Perkins and the board. While Attorney Perkins was aware that Mr. Sicca was involved in some school business, she did not know the nature or details of the work he was performing. Attorney Perkins did not discover any evidence that Mr. Sicca's work involved anything to do with her investigation, nor does there appear to be any evidence contained in the emails released to the Concord Monitor that Mr. Sicca influenced or attempted to influence the outcome of the report. Has Mr. Sicca performed any duties since the board placed him on leave? The only duties Mr. Sicca could perform on his leave after the board placed him on leave were things only he could do, such as testifying under subpoena at a court or administrative hearing about events that he observed or actions he took in connection with his work with the district. Any instance of performing such duties required prior consultation with board counsel. What did board members know about the Leung investigation as it was being conducted, and when did they know it? The only board members who were aware of the investigation prior to Mr. Leung's arrest were the board president and vice president. The information shared with those two members was extremely limited, and neither knew more than minimal information until they read Attorney Perkins' report in late September. What was shared earlier did not in any way reveal the magnitude of Mr. Leung's actions or give cause to believe that students were at risk. This level of information sharing reflects the fact that a superintendent is responsible for overseeing staff, and board members need to remain impartial so they could hear an appeal of any action taken by the superintendent. Board members did not advise the superintendent on what action to take in the Leung investigation or personnel action, and they did not give legal advice. In the week prior to Mr. Leung's arrest, the board president and vice president were made aware that a search warrant had been executed at Concord High School relating to Mr. Leung. However, they were told that police had prohibited the superintendent from sharing this fact with anyone, including other board members, until such time as an arrest was made. Shouldn't board members have reported the car incident to the police in December or January? The facts that were shared with the two board members during the 2018-19 investigation did not include information that would have given them any reasonable basis to conclude that Mr. Leung was engaged in a sexual relationship with a student, which would have triggered potentially a duty to report to police. Shouldn't these board members have insisted on a more thorough investigation or investigated the matter themselves? The board members who were aware of the investigation did ask questions, and the answers revealed no reason to believe the investigation was not being conducted appropriately. Investigating allegations and taking disciplinary action with respect to staff members is the duty of the superintendent, not board members. If board members conducted their own investigations and reached their own conclusions about the facts, they would not be able to hear any appeal of an action taken by the superintendent. Again, those are the most important questions that we wanted to give some answers to tonight. We will be providing additional information in response to the questions that we received, and that will be posted. So finally, another thing that we think is important in terms of regaining trust with the community is talking about what happened with Mr. Leung and sharing information to a greater degree than was contained in the second report from Attorney Perkins. The board has always stated that it would release any information it could to the public consistent with the state's right to know law and other federal and state laws which protect personnel records and school records and information. It was not until board members read the report that they realized it would be impossible to release the report even in redacted form while protecting student confidentiality and complying with the right to know law. The report reviewed by board members is already redacted. It does not contain the names of students or staff other than Superintendent Forston and Mr. Sicca. However, due to its meticulous level of detail and the fact that much of the conduct described was observed by many people or has been discussed publicly, many or all of the people involved would be readily identifiable in a redacted format. The board recognizes the community's frustration that the report cannot be released. What the board can and will do is move forward on the recommendations contained in Attorney Perkins' second report and seek additional input from experts and the community to improve the district's policies and train staff and students so as to prevent another individual from attempting to assault Concord School District students. And to that end, I am looking for a motion to take a vote on moving forward with the recommendations in conjunction with the community.
Motion to prepare strategic plans to act on Attorney Perkins' recommendations. I move that the board vote to instruct district administrators to prepare a strategic plan for proceeding in response to Attorney Perkins' recommendations, to include input from all stakeholders in the community, and present the initial plan to the board at its December meeting.
Thank you, Barb. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second. I'll give it to Danielle. Danielle. Okay. She said it first.
Moved by Barb, seconded by Danielle. Is there any discussion of that motion?
I think it's important that we all, as common sense folks, realize that that second report has an awful lot of information in it. We will ask our interim superintendent and our acting superintendent to work very hard to get a report and a strategic plan together for December, knowing full well that we also are asking them to run the rest of the district at the same time.
Any other discussion?
Well, I think it's important. Sorry.
Stakeholders in the community is all of you, parents of children, teachers, teachers' aides, anyone that is connected with our school district is a stakeholder. And so helpful, constructive input to help make a plan effective and positive is necessary from everybody. We have to work together on this. It's not easy, don't we know, but it's important for the safety and, moving forward of our children.
Thank you, Barb. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, so the motion passes. So our next agenda item is public comment on agenda items only. And we welcome public comment. I'll remind folks of our policy number 136, which states that the primary purpose of school board meetings is to conduct the business of the board. So the monthly board agenda will include a time for citizens to address the board on both agenda topics and non-agenda topics. Speakers will be allotted 5 minutes per person, and is there someone who can keep track of the 5 minutes? So Matt Cashman will be keeping track of time, and Matt, what will you do to indicate the time?
You want the alarm to go off?
Maybe when there's 30 seconds remaining, you could hold something up and then have the alarm go off. So if you could just look to Matt. I can't see Matt very well, actually, so. That's perfect. Thank you. I don't know if they can see.
They can't see
Let's
you there, Matt.
Maybe you can sit by Dr. Bass. Do you want to do that?
Front and center.
Thank you, Matt.
There you go.
This is, that's perfect. Okay, thank you, Matt. And if anyone coming up forward to speak, if you can write your name and clearly speak into the microphone. You may want to take the microphone off. It actually may work better that way.
Hello?
Yes, perfect.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Michelle Larry, Deerfield, New Hampshire. As defined by the Department of Justice, the penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by sex organ of another person without consent of the victim is rape. On November 29th, 2017, my daughter was riding home on the school bus from Concord High School when a fellow Concord High classmate put his hands on and then inside of her. This is rape. Not bullying, not sexual harassment. This is rape. The events that have unfolded in those following days, weeks, months, and now 2 years demonstrate the misogynistic rape culture that is ingrained in this district. I have listened to board members' deafening silence during committee and school board meetings, not engaging in dialogue or involved in the topic of sexual assault, violence, or rape, contributing to the ongoing denial that sexual violence and assault do not exist in the Concord School District, and discrediting survivors while maintaining the status quo. Sweep it under the rug. I have watched the look of apathy on board members' faces as students and parents shared their stories and community experts offered their expertise. I have witnessed board members walk away when the community's questions and conversations became too difficult and challenging. On November 1st, I heard school board president and members say that they were volunteers, that they had attended marathon powerhouse meetings lasting multiple hours and multiple days, requiring them to rearrange their schedules and lives. To you I say, I am so sorry that the sexual violence perpetrated on my daughter and the teacher on student survivor has so drastically challenged your lives. Now let me share with you how the events of November 29th have affected my daughters. I have watched her crumble and shrivel up into herself and withdraw and isolate away from her family. She went from being a happy, confident, easygoing girl planning for her future to someone who lost interest in her passion for dance, nature, learning, her future, and life. She lost her dignity, her humanity, her confidence, her identity, and her sense of community. She suffered betrayal of friends, administrators, authority, and male figures. Simple things like running to the grocery store, shopping, and going to the movies are anxiety-inducing because of the fear of running into her perpetrator. These past events are not and never have been about you. They are about the sexual assault survivors and many failures of the adults in charge, which include following the Memorandum of Understanding, federal and state law, and the policies and procedures already in place. You can write and rewrite policies and procedures, but they are only as good as the culture and the people tasked to implement and follow them.
My name is Melissa Heimbach. I live here in Concord. And before I begin with my questions, I would like to thank Michelle, who just spoke. As a fellow rape survivor, I am incredibly sorry for your suffering and for your daughter's suffering for the violation that occurred and for your continued traumatization. You both deserve much better. I have 2 children who are currently in the Concord Public Schools. One of my kids had Howie Leung as a case manager. As we mentioned previously, a number of parents put together a list of questions and submitted these to the board for answers. We have received a couple answers this evening. I would like to ask a couple more. I would like to ask, does Attorney Bennett represent the school board? Is that correct? Okay, I assume it is. I would also like to ask, who is paying the bill for Attorney Bennett's time?
They won't answer.
I think we are not providing answers to these questions now. I think these were included on the list of questions.
They
so we will be providing answers when we answer that list of questions.
Excellent. I'm going to ask these anyway. Who is paying for Attorney Perkins's time and reports? It is my understanding that the taxpayers are paying for Attorney Bennett's time to protect the school board and paying for Attorney Perkins's reports, but we as parents, impacted students, and community members will never be privy to the information in the first report. As stated earlier by President Patterson, Attorney Perkins did know the extent to which Tom Sicca was actively engaged in the day-to-day business of Concord High School during the investigation. And my question is, if she was aware that Tom Sicca was in communication with anyone in the school district, why on earth did she continue talking to teachers, staff, and other interviewees who were under a clear imbalance of power and in danger of retaliation? In my opinion, both reports are invalid because of that power dynamic. There are other questions that we have submitted, and I look forward to the written answers in full. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, board and audience. First of all, thank you for the information you provided. Thank you for the incredibly amount of hard work. We do appreciate that you guys are working hard, and it is a volunteer position, and we appreciate it. I feel like there's a renewed sense of some transparency, and we appreciate that as well, and we certainly feel that there's movement in the right direction, both through the second report and through the recent actions of the resignation of Principal Sicca and Superintendent Forston. But there's still a lot of questions. And I would hate to see everyone ask questions tonight and just the whole board be silent. I think that certainly does not reinforce a feeling of transparency and communication and collaboration. So I'm really gonna hope that you don't just write all these down and refuse to answer anything, especially obvious questions like who's paying for Bennett. I mean, that's just a factual question. I don't understand why that can't be answered tonight. So I really encourage you to not do this all night, because that's not gonna set a very good tone. So with that said, I'm gonna ask some questions maybe you can answer right off the bat, and maybe some questions that do need to have more thought. At the heart of all this crisis is obviously what happened last year. And even though we now know that Principal Sicca is no longer going to work at the school and Superintendent Forston is gone, we don't know why they're gone. We don't know what they did. We don't know what they didn't do. We don't have any information except for what we can infer from the second report and from public information as to why they're gone. That leaves a gaping hole. It leaves a huge puzzle in this community that leaves everyone in this room very unsettled. It leaves me very unsettled, having had Howie Leung as my son Samuel's teacher. I'm Dan Habib, if I didn't mention that earlier. I'm a Concord resident. So, a couple questions along those lines. We know some information that's been in the public. We know that staff at Concord High were reporting serious concerns about Howie the Young's behavior to Concord High administrators by September, starting at least in September of last year. And this doesn't go back to the middle school situation that we've heard a lot about, but at least in September we were hearing serious concerns. We know that in early December, students reported seeing Howie the Young kissing another student in a car off campus and reported that to administrators. We know that Howie the Young was then allowed to continue to be in close proximity to students, my son included, through late March 2019, almost 4 months after the report of him kissing a girl on top of other serious concerns. And we can certainly infer that it's very possible that sexual assaults that Howie's alleged to have committed could have continued during that time. So more sexual assaults could have happened during that time that he was at Concord High. These are extremely serious and unsettling realities that we know. So we know that Howie the Young was arrested in April for multiple counts of rapes of one student, and we know that it's rare in situations like this that there's only one victim. So it's very possible that there are other victims of Howie Young's power and influence. So you said earlier that the report number 1 can't be released in a redacted form. We know that it's over 100 pages, and we know that this community has to have more information about what happened in our community, why it happened, and who were responsible through their actions or inactions, many of whom are probably still at Concord High School. Some of whom probably did heroic things to stop this from happening. Some of whom really worked hard to stop this from happening, but others may have, through negligence, inaction, or actions, allowed Howie to stay in the school for 4 more months, potentially committing more violations of students. So I do want to know, when is the public going to learn more about this? And I don't buy that this information is never going to come out. Because you could talk to Attorney Perkins and say, we want you to create a report that we can release to the public that does not violate law and that does not compromise student confidentiality. You can do that as a board. You can ask her, and you should ask her to create that report. Because we need, through transparency, we need the public to understand what happened and what people might have been responsible for allowing this to happen. Now, Howie, of course, is the most responsible here. I'm not trying to take away from that. But there are other people that may have enabled this, and people who are still at the school, still working with kids. They're not criminals per se, but they may not have done their jobs well, and they may have done it so poorly that they maybe they shouldn't continue to be in those positions. So I know you're not going to answer that tonight, but I want you to think about that, and I want you to think about, can you charge Attorney Perkins with that report? We out of time? Okay, so last thing I'll say is I heard you talk about the school board, and again, I have great respect and friendship with many of you on the board, so I'm not demeaning you in any way. It's a really tough job. But I think there's one question I really do want to understand, which is, and this may apply mostly to the president and the chair and the vice chair, which is that report that Howie was kissing a girl that came out in December. You know, according to Attorney Perkins, New Hampshire law states that it forbids sexual penetration of a person between the ages of 13 and 18 by a person with authority over that person who uses that authority to coerce the victim to submit. It's not a far stretch to think that if a teacher is kissing an 18-year-old girl in a car, there may be some sexual activity going on. That is such a huge red flag, and I do want to understand whether the school board, anyone on the school board knew about that report back in December, that Howie was found to be kissing a girl. And I think if you, and maybe you weren't aware of that, but if you were aware of that, I really think you have to recuse yourself from the decision-making around what gets released from this report. Because, and maybe, I'm hoping that you weren't. You can tell me right now if you didn't know about that. But if you did, I think that's a huge conflict of interest in terms of what you're going to ask to be released in the report, because it could implicate you. And I hope you're not implicated. I hope you didn't know anything about that. But I think the public has to know that, because it has to also have faith in the leadership of the board, and whether they knew that or not. So, my time is probably up. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
My name is Elizabeth Gerard, and I am a Concord resident, and my son attends Concord High School. First, I want to talk to Michelle. That made me cry. That speech was so powerful. And I think what bothered me the most is the only person I saw react was Chuck Crush. Everybody else was literally stoic. That is pathological and narcissistic. I was crying. That's a concern for me. Don't give me that look. I just saw it. No, it's pathological and narcissistic.
It's devastating to listen to.
Yeah, I so saw it in your face. So I just wanted to say that that was, and I am so sorry. Having worked in domestic violence in Boston and internationally, I am so sorry. How much did we pay for Sika's resignation? No, I'm serious, I wanna know that like now.
That will be available publicly. We don't have that number, but that is something that will be made public pursuant to 91A. So I think Larry Prince will
Because I'm
have
sure
that information. We don't have a number right now, but that will be public information.
Okay, because I'm sure that we had to like pay him off.
Jenny, how do people go about obtaining that information? What's the process?
I think they could make a request from Larry Prince. I don't know if he'll have it, I don't think he has it today, but he should have it sometime this week.
Okay. And then the next thing I wanted to address is the 10 pages that I read. That was garbage. That was nothing that we didn't already know and that should have been in place decades ago. That didn't tell us anything that was important or relevant because we already knew all this. And how much did we pay for that report? Because I'd like to know.
The bills can be made public. I don't think there's going to be something specific to report by report, but the bills will be a matter of public record.
And I have a huge issue with the first point. So the first point, if everybody on the first page, it says accept that sexual abuse can and does occur in public schools and that non-sexual boundary violations are often precursors to sexual abuse. What do you mean accept? What does that mean to you? Because that was pretty sloppy. That was sloppy. That was clumsy writing. Because are we supposed to accept that sexual abuse exists? Because I don't accept that. The whole point is to end domestic violence and to end domestic assault. So I'm not accepting that that's happening at my school, or anywhere for that matter. I'm not accepting that at all. So I do not like the way that was written in any way, because what that's telling me is that I have to accept that that happens, and I'm not accepting that, so.
I got to say something. Look, there's nobody on this board that is accepting that in the school district. I got to be crystal clear. I think what the investigator was saying is that, thank you. I think what the investigator was saying is it does happen. It's a reality. It's horrible. But I'm telling you right now, nobody on this board accepts that, okay? Thank you.
It was clumsily written.
I'm not going to argue with the semantics.
And I just want to address Pam for what she said on November 1st. I'd rather vote for Pedro. You didn't just lose my respect on Friday, you lost my vote on tomorrow, on Tuesday.
You could probably just leave it off because people are taking it out. Leave it out of the culture. There you go. Just like that.
Elizabeth, did you sign the sheet?
I already did.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bill Glahn, and as some of you know, I sat in your seats for 11 years, not in anywhere near as nice a facility as this, I would might add. I want to echo, and as you know, I've written to you today, I want to echo what Dan Habib said in a slightly different context. In addition to having served on this board, I was the chair of the board of Dairyfield School and served on that board for 12 years. In my legal practice, I've represented a number of independent schools who have been engaged in investigations exactly like this one. And very often those investigations are conducted exactly the same way they were done here. And for the most part, the reports that have been prepared remain confidential. And they do so for all the reasons that you've set forth here, which is you don't want to violate the privacy of other individuals. However, in almost all of those instances, schools do put out a summary which explains, in general terms, what happened, what was the problem, and how was it addressed? And then, what have we learned from that? How do we move forward? And I think that's what you're trying to do. And I think that would, by the way, when you sit on a school board, for the most part, people come to complain to you, not to compliment you or suggest you're doing things the right way. I think you are, but I think that it's gone on long enough so that it's easy for those people to say, for people to say in the community, we need to have more facts. And I think in this case, you need that. You need to give a general summary of what kinds of things were found, why weren't certain steps taken, what's going to happen in the future, and what have we learned from that. I won't say more. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the effort you put into it. It's very easy when you sit outside of the legal construct that you operate in to say, well, we should have more information. But you are constrained by a number of things, as Ms. Patterson pointed out. You would sit to make the personnel decision that has to be made as a result of an appeal. So you can't know more. And I remember when I sat in your position, we had several cases like that where you simply could not know the facts before the ultimate decision was to be made. So I'm mindful of that, but I do encourage you to provide more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, hi. My name is Anna Goebel. I'm a Concord resident. First, I want to thank all the board members for their hard work. So much progress has been made, and I can't thank you enough for starting to make Concord schools a better place. I feel so supported by the board members, and I'm starting to get a feeling of closure. I have one question. If Sika continued to work during the summer, why was I told he could not attend the apology meeting because he was on a paid leave of absence? The support I have received from community members has been amazing, and it's helped me through this really hard time. But the fact that Mr. Sika was so close to apologizing to me, but got away with not apologizing, is something that still sticks with me, and it makes it harder to move on. We've always been taught that when you do something wrong, you're supposed to apologize, but the fact that he didn't and he made a very big mistake is something that really sticks with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for your courage and
Hello, my name is Betsy McNamara, Concord. Thank you for taking the questions that were gathered by a number of parents and sent in advance and taking them and committing to answering them in writing. Really, really appreciate that, and I look forward to reading those answers and appreciate the answers that were given tonight. So I have a question. First, I want to say that I want to follow on what Dan Habib said and what Bill Glahn said, and would really like to know more about what happened and what didn't happen. And I think the reason is that it feels very much like if we don't know really what went wrong, how will we know when you're getting it right? I think it's a big part of rebuilding trust and regaining trust. My question tonight is one of the ones that was emailed in advance, and it is specific to the report and the fact that there seems to be a perception that since Principal Sika continued to work over the summer, that fact had no impact on the investigation because none of the witnesses expressed concern about it or fear of repercussion. And I would just say that at the same time, though, in the emails that we are now all able to read, there was a memo from Steve Rothenberg that the administration 100% support Tom Sika and gave the indication that he would be back within 4 weeks. I think that we have to understand that that alone is a level of, it could have been a level of intimidation that people are just not going to acknowledge to an investigator or to an attorney. And so it could have impacted the report. And so the specific question is, should the investigator give staff and perhaps any students that were investigated who may have thought that Principal Sika was returning another chance to comment, now that, as of tonight, we know that Principal Sika is not returning? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Wood. I wanted to also thank you for the work that you've done. I'm sure it's not easy to sit in your seats. I appreciate you welcoming us to these meetings and hearing what we have to say. I do appreciate that. I do feel like we're moving forward slowly. I do feel like we have more work to do, but I'm starting to feel like there's some closure. I appreciated that we were able to review the second report. I agree with what some of the other parents said. I don't feel like it gave us a whole lot of information in how this happened. Do I want to know specifics? No, absolutely not. That's not fair to the students. That's not fair to a lot of people. That's not my information. I have a daughter in middle school. 2 years, will be a freshman at the high school. She is a budding, almost 13-year-old. So my concern is, how do we move forward? How do I know she's not going to be put into a compromised situation? How do I know that this isn't going to happen again? I was more curious, some things stood out to me. I noticed there was some recommendations made in the second report to the school district, and I was curious, will those recommendations be taken into consideration? Will they be put into place? And will we know that those recommendations like a climate survey, a Title IX coordinator, that really stood out to me. And I feel like if those things were considered and we knew what the plan was and when these recommendations were going to start, I think it would give us a little more closure, especially for a mom of a preteen daughter.
Thank you, Kim, for those questions, and I'm happy to answer that because that was actually why we took the vote to instruct the administrators to prepare a strategic plan, because we do take this very seriously, and I think that part of moving forward is to have a very specific, concrete plan working with the community so that everyone can see where we stand and what progress we're making on those recommendations. So that is something that we're intending to do.
Good evening. My name is Max Schultz. I'm a candidate for school board for tomorrow, and I have 3 children in the district. I live here in Concord. There was a lot of great questions tonight, a lot of great comments. I just have a couple things about the investigative report. And I know that Concord Police, I assume, has been doing their own investigation, I know. And you folks have hired someone to do your administrative investigation, which involved interviewing many, many people that maybe Concord Police were not able to access because of the availability that you have as their employees or students. You may have more access. So I don't know if you are or not, but I would think that you would be offering to turn over that investigative report to Concord Police to see if anyone else is responsible, or someone who has left employment or someone currently employed who could be possibly criminally responsible for endangering the welfare of children or any other violations of the law. So I would encourage you to do that. I would also encourage you to, as I did Friday night when I spoke with you, to release the entire investigative report to Dr. Bass so that he can evaluate everything, not just pieces and parts that may affect him. I understand he's interim, only working, part-time, but anyone that has Googled his name, which I'm sure thousands of people have over the last few days, has realized he's also been battled in some controversy over time. I'm assuming that that is one of the reasons you have hired him. I don't know that, but if it is, you didn't mention that Friday, but I'm assuming that someone who's been in a train crash probably is an expert on a train crash. So I assume you'll talk about that more tonight to explain his background when it comes up here. But just as far as the investigative report, I wanted to encourage you to release that to him.
Absolutely, we will be sharing it with him.
I think we already answered that. We already stated we're going to release it to him, and yes, and we can talk about his background in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elaine Duclos. Concord, 6 of my children went through this school district. Some of you, well, no, one of you had some of them in school. Next door. Yep, that would be Tom. Some of my question and comment has been spoken to and somewhat addressed by previous speakers, but as a Concord resident taxpayer who has grandchildren, granddaughters in the Concord School District now, one at Runlet, one at the high school, I really felt obligated to be here to hear what you all had to say or not say and what other folks had to contribute. I am baffled, confused, and angry that there were and are faculty, staff, and I have to assume administrators in this district who learned of directly from students some of the behavior and crimes that you have been addressing, and who chose to, beyond what Tom Sicca did to Anna Goebel, who chose to ignore and retaliate against those students in one way or another, intimidate, use power. I am absolutely horrified. I too, as one of the previous speakers mentioned, have worked with abused and domestic violence and sexually abused women and children. I'm a member of the Concord Crisis Center as an advocate here in town. And I also did that in a previous life. I am absolutely horrified that what I've just spoken to was actually made public in the newspaper. This wasn't in a report, this was stated. I can't begin to tell you how angry that makes me. And I guess my question to all of you, and I am certain that it is not one that can be responded to at this time, but I, like everyone else who has spoken, would like to see and read a whole lot more information than what we've gotten. Transparency is barely beginning to crack a light. To know that reports are going to continue to be written and filed along with more reports is not satisfactory. Not to me, and I suspect not to most of the Concord residents. But to be aware and informed that at least Concord High School faculty and or staff knew of some of what was going on, chose to dismiss and retaliate against students who came to them out of concern and for support, and some sort of positive resolution might, what nags at me is anything, and again, some of this has been raised by other speakers, is anything going to happen or be done regarding those individuals who work at Concord High School, who teach at Concord High School? I don't know whether my granddaughter has any contact with them or not. It doesn't matter to me. They work for the Concord School District. My taxes pay their salary, part of their salary. Administrators who knew what was going on. Will anything happen to them? I know if Forston's gone and Sick is gone. Great. That is the tip of the iceberg. And if I'm going. And if anyone thinks that those two absences are going to now make Concord feel warm and fuzzy, I doubt it. So I do thank you for the work you've done so far. I think there is a long way to go. I think there is a much longer way to go before there's trust in this community with regards to the Concord School District. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, and we plan on getting to responses to those questions, so thank you, we appreciate it.
Hello, this is Penny Duffy, and from Concord, New Hampshire. I'll make sure I sign that before I leave, I promise. I just really want to encourage the board that we need to have something on what the findings were. We don't need the details. We need to have something kind of summary. I want to know, I don't think this has been answered yet, were any of the current district policies, were they all followed? Was that our current district policies, or were some actually broken? That's a simple question. Were our poor policies we had a couple months ago that we worked so hard over the summer that you guys changed, were even those followed? That's one of the questions I want to know. I think that's simple. I don't think that's going to hurt any conflict of interest. Not going to have anyone, any child or former or current employee will not be involved in that answer to the questions. It's a very upper level answer. I think we need some kind of summary. This is something. We need more than just the recommendations, which I think that's just common sense. And one of the other things I really just wanted to address, because I thought it was a great thing, is, and this is not me being sarcastic, I was really excited about seeing the service dog and the therapy dog policies being worked on. Yes, the Concord School District should follow Americans with Disability Act. And the thing is, I'm sure they would, but it's great to see a policy going to be put into place, and I think that's really going to be great, because there's always a big question mark about that thing. And if my daughter had a service dog, I would at least be able to look to a policy now, once this gets after a couple of readings, we'll actually be able to say this is what the policy is. I think I've only looked at it a few times, but I think it's a good step, and I'm really excited about that. And I have some other comments I'll make, because I think it's more at the end, because I think it's more to follow the rules. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Julie O'Brien, and as I sit here listening, I get more and more emotional, and I'm a little anxious about doing this, so I'm going to do my best to get through it. I have a student who was a student of Mr. Leon, who as a case manager, in retrospect, supported our son very well until we learned of the circumstances surrounding his dismissal. However, I am not at all supporting anything horrible that has happened that we've since learned at all. My concern is for my son and other students who had Mr. Young as a case manager, who upon his departure were left to flounder unnecessarily. I mean, and now learning the other things about the other administrators involved, it was difficult for me to come forward and express my concern, but I feel if I don't, I'm not doing any good for my child or any children to come that may have to go through a similar situation. I feel like I've spoken with other parents who had students at Concord at the time who had the same case manager, their grades suffered, their school performance suffered, their emotional state suffered tremendously, a great loss. And some students, as I understand it, were required to go to summer school. They had an IEP. They were supposed to be getting academic support, and the school failed them. And it's tough to advocate for your child, and it's tough to see your child struggle. And it's not a perfect world. I am all about my child struggling and holding him accountable for what he needs to do. That's not I'm not trying to. But I just feel that the students who most needed the support, who were still students at Concord High, were left to flounder unnecessarily, and I think that's a travesty. I really do. So these kids that are some of the most vulnerable kids in this situation were almost ignored and left to, I don't want to say suffer on their own, but they did not get the support they need. And so students who struggle every day to make it through a school day have gotten no support. It makes it more difficult. I mean, it affects their self-confidence, their desire to persevere. Some of these students, I learned about what was going on from teammates on athletic teams, on sidelines of playing fields, and were astonished and surprised that this person that they idolized could have done something so horrible. And my concern is, I'm aware of the school offering counselor sessions to the students who were interested. But for students with IEPs, I've been a special education paraeducator for years. Those children are the ones that have the most difficult time advocating for themselves. So to expect that a teenage boy or girl would sign up to meet with a counselor, I think is very unrealistic, and I think it would be in the best interest of the students to come up with some sort of plan that, heaven forbid, something like this ever happens again, or any other educator is suddenly ripped from a classroom with no explanation, that there is some sort of protocol in place to support those students that are remaining and those students who still need to continue on and struggle. And when you see a student who you've advocated for years finally get the support they need, and then in March 29th, the grades do this in every class and gently start to creep up, and there's 3 or 4 meetings in 2 months that my husband and I have to make to follow up and advocate for a child for an IEP that's legally supposed to be followed and isn't. And I'm not the only one, and I know of other parents who had similar concerns and whose students were never questioned or no support was given. And I think that's what troubles me the most, is that some of these families and students really, this whole situation's horrible. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, but I feel it would be not in my best interest to speak up. And I just want to make that something that you're aware of, and hopefully, welcome Dr. Bass, but something to keep in mind as you're moving forward with going on. I'm sorry.
No, thank you, because this was one of the layers of impacts that I hadn't heard about before, so I really appreciate your coming forward to talk about it.
And I'll say one thing, you know what? For students that we didn't support, we certainly apologize.
My daughter, Gracie, very learning disabled, lost a sister, struggled through high school, was a student of Mr. Lamb this year. And so it was very, very difficult for me to find all this out through her and to watch her tank. She's a student at the Tech now. She hates school. And is it all because of this? No, but for a girl that had lost so much, to lose that kind of trust. I just need you to know that I get it. And I don't know what to do either, and it makes me cry. So this is really something that we could get a group of parents and teachers to work on so that we can put something in place to do it better next time and to jump in and help now.
And that's why I wanted to give you this information. I didn't want to cry foul and complain because I feel like if you don't show up and make you aware, I'm not doing my part. So that's the only reason I'm here. It's not, yes. So that's all. So thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you for bringing that.
Good evening, I'm Kate Fry, Concord resident. I'm also Anna Goebel's mother. I want to thank you all very much for your hard work. I know it hasn't been easy. I know that people like me have been pressuring you to do the right thing, and I'm really feel fortunate that you have stepped up so much. I will say I just feel so sad tonight for everyone here, and I really hope that we can get past this, but we can only do it if we do it together. But I think the key part of it is to still answer a lot of these questions that we're hearing tonight. Even if we can't get the answers tonight, we look forward to getting them in the near future. I am still concerned, like some people had voiced, about how the fact that Tom Sicca continued to work over the summer impacted the investigation. And I guess I don't buy it when I hear that you didn't read anything in emails to think that there was any influence over that investigation. It was very clear from those emails that Tom Sicca met with his administrative team, it sounds like almost on a weekly basis. Sure, there might not have been any emails, but there were opportunities for them to meet and talk, and as far as I know, align their stories. Mr. Sicca could have had conversations with other staff, and in fact, when we were questioned by the investigator, it was clear that that investigator had been peppered with information that was trying to discredit Anna. So I really don't buy the story that just because it was not in emails, that it did not impact the investigation, and that people weren't doing their best to kind of align their stories. I will say too, as much as I appreciate your work, I continue to be a little disappointed about the fact that when it was announced that he would be on voluntary leave last year, it was never mentioned that he would be doing special projects. And I don't think anybody in this room would have ever thought that was a good idea for the obvious reasons. I also, my question is regarding when we read the recommendations in report number 2, we know that these recommendations didn't come out of thin air, and they're based on what the investigator uncovered. And based on that, there are really serious breaks of the code of ethics by staff, very serious breaks. We don't know who they are, but we know there were breaks, including unprofessional conduct, failure to provide appropriate supervision of students, lack of professional communication, discrimination against students, and most importantly, the duty to report. And so based on that, I'd like to know what will happen with that information in report number 1. Will that information be reported by the board or the interim student superintendent to the New Hampshire Department of Education because of those breaks of the Code of Ethics? I think that's really, really important to know. Again, I thank you all for your work. We have much more to do, and I continue to look forward to working with you all.
Thank
Good evening. Gina Cannon. I'm a resident of Concord. I want to say that I think accepting Principal Sicca's resignation is a good step, an outstanding step. But I want to also let you know that in the course of talking with a lot of teachers, you need to know that they are afraid. I cannot tell you how many teachers came to me and said, I saw something and I reported it and I got retaliated against. Or I saw something, but I didn't dare report it because I knew what happened to so-and-so and I didn't want that to happen to me. The teachers in our district are afraid to come forward. And I think, unfortunately, along with a lot of other comments that have been heard tonight, the statement of we are 100% behind Principal Sicca affected what the teachers were willing to say. There's a lot more investigation that needs to go on, a lot more conversations that need to take place with the teachers. Maybe also with the students. I didn't get a chance to talk with a lot of students. Maybe the students are afraid as well. But I can tell you that the teachers are afraid to come forward and say what they know. And that needs to be looked into. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Smith, Concord resident. And I think this was a good time for me to come up to say what I wanted to say because it goes along to prove why I feel we need an advocate on site. So I thank you very much for mentioning your updates earlier about your work with the Crisis Center, specifically about having an advocate on site. Because I don't think the Crisis Center had that same take after meeting with Donna Pally, so I'm pleased to hear that the Concord School District is open to that. Every time a new revelation is exposed in the media, students continue to be re-traumatized by the events of the past. There should be informed, specialized services on campus for students. They don't feel comfortable, and as you're hearing, staff don't feel comfortable, but the students don't feel comfortable talking to staff and administrators. The board and district committed to having the supports there for them this summer, and that's what we hope to see. So I really look forward to hearing about your work with the Crisis Center. They're local and they're free, and they want to be there. So thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Hi, everyone. Deli Champagne, Concord resident. It was mentioned a few board meetings ago that the district was considering a hotline of some sort to have students file complaints. And I remember Superintendent Forston saying the calls were going to be answered or received by a district employee. And my response to that is, no, 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 no. That is more of the same. That's ludicrous. Please do not allow someone enmeshed in the district to respond to those calls. That's putting us right back to where we are. We need an independent investigator that's qualified to do that. I know in Exeter they use a retired police officer who is not involved with the district. I would really implore you to take a look at a model like that and keep it very separate from district happenings, goings on. Thanks.
Thank you, Beth.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Britt-Solsky. My kids are all in Concord Public Schools. I want to commend you on accepting Principal Sicca's resignation. And I want to implore you, as much as we need to unearth and learn of the activities of the last several years, business goes on. And the lack of leadership shows itself every day. And our family's been navigating another issue that certainly does not rise to the attention of this important meeting or this body, but it illustrates that the administrators who are there don't have effective leadership today. And when two equals at the administrative level don't agree on what to do, nothing gets done. And it's sending a pretty rotten message. And it also means that opportunities to correct violations of policy and law do not get the light that they deserve. And so I would hope that you will act with all haste to find an appropriate successor to Principal Sicca, so that the kids who are in school today, for the teachers and the administrators, that they get the kind of example and the leadership that they so desperately need. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, and that is definitely a really high priority. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charlotte Goebel. I am a Concord resident. I also want to thank the board members for working tirelessly and helping our community rebuild trust. But I just want to express how heartbreaking it was to hear an administrator at my school, Steve Rothenberg, state that the administration 100% supports Tom Sicca and the news was sourced from one side. The students and staff need administrators that are with them and not against them. Thank you.
Just for folks who may not have been here before, we do have another opportunity for public comment at the close of the meeting, so
I'll be the
there will
last
be
one.
another chance. You don't have to be the last one? That's fine, go ahead.
My name is Don Larry. You heard my wife speak earlier on the effects of my daughter. That just touched the tip of the iceberg of what she sees. It has affected my relationship, as she doesn't trust any male body at this point. And I just want to make note of a meeting I had with one of the administrators when I told him that the people involved in my daughter's case, not one of them showed any compassion, empathy, or even stopped her in the hallway and said, "How is your day going and what can I do to make it better?" And his response was that I told him that I should be present at every interaction with her. And I've informed him that I don't need to be present for them to show any empathy and compassion to any student or any faculty member who's going through a tough time. I've read tweets that teachers need to be reminded to be kind. If you need to be reminded to be kind, you shouldn't be in a position of teaching. And there's a thing out there that's recently new, it's called No Child Left Behind. Every child that's been victimized, either with a handicap, a disability, sexual assault, or abuse, that's going through something right now that has not come forward and has come forward, they have been left behind. That's something you want to think about. Thank you.
else right now, again, there will be another opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. Thank you, Matt, for the timekeeping function. So our next agenda item is approval of board minutes. I think I'm going to go through them quite quickly so we can keep moving.
We do have one change.
Oh, okay, that's right. So the first is the minutes of our regular board meeting on October 7th. Is that the one that you had a change to?
I believe so, yes.
Yep, go ahead, Tom.
So it's a very simple change. At the end of the minutes, it says respectfully submitted Tom Cotto Chair, which is not necessarily what happened. It was probably more like Jenny Patterson.
Or I think it was maybe, it might have been
It might have been
Jim.
Jim
Usually,
Richards.
it would be Jim.
I
Yeah.
was going to say, I submitted those
So
minutes.
it's not earth-shattering, but it's just for the record.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Tom and Lyndon. I think it should reflect that Jim as secretary, that would be typical.
Yes, I proofed and approved those minutes, and I don't know how Tom's name got on it, but I'm the one responsible
Okay.
for those.
Good. Thank you, Tom. Are there any other changes to the minutes of that October 7th meeting? Okay, I'm going to do all of these at once with the motion, I think. So the next set of minutes is from our special board meeting to vote on the bond resolution. That was on October 28th. Those minutes are on pages 12 to 13. And that was a meeting of the full board. Let's see, that's not the right one. Okay. Oh, there we go, okay. 12 to 13. So this was the rebonding for the elementary school projects. I actually wasn't present for that meeting, but are there any changes to those minutes?
No,
Okay.
not that I saw.
So the next was the September 28th special board meeting on the fiscal year 20 budget. That was a significant meeting. I think that we may address it in more detail when Tom Cotto gives the update on the Finance Committee meeting that led to that. But were there any changes to that budget meeting?
Can I make one comment there?
Sure. Yep.
The important comment from that particular meeting, because it'll make the other notes, if you listen to them, make a little more sense, was that on October 23rd, this city valuation information was received by our business administrator, Jack Dunn. And as a result of that increase in Concord's valuation and the changes to the budget proposed, Mr. Dunn projected that there would be a decrease in the local tax rate of 1.04% and a decrease in the state rate of 4.21% for a combined tax rate decrease of 1.48%. So that was among the many pieces of not so wonderful and pleasant news, that was one of the better.
Thank you, Tom, for reminding us of that good news. It is really good news for taxpayers and for the board, so thank you. So the next minute meetings are of the special board meeting on October 30th. Those are on page 19. Tom, did you want to speak to those at all?
Very briefly, it's just that that was the meeting that we met to release the report from Attorney Perkins to the public for the second report.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And then on page 20 to 25 are the minutes of the special board meeting on November 1st. That was Friday. That was the meeting where we voted to accept the resignation of Superintendent Forston and to move forward with a conditional offer of part-time employment to Dr. Bass, who we will hear from later this evening. Are there any changes to those minutes?
None that I saw.
So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve all of those sets of minutes, October 7th, the two from October 28th, October 30th and November 1st. Would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
So moved by Tom Croto, seconded by Chuck Crush. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving those minutes indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So all of those minutes are approved. We have an agenda item of amending the public hearing minutes of September 30th, 2019, and is there someone who can speak to that?
Yes. In front of you, you have a copy of the amended minutes. This was the public hearing we did for the refunding on the loan resolution for the bond. And at the end of the minutes, they said the committee members voted 4-0. It should have said the board members voted 7-0.
Okay.
And we have amended, the amended minutes are in front of you, but your board minutes you approved back on the monthly board meeting on 10/7 said that, so we just need to make that change.
Yeah, and again, that was what in fact occurred. It just, we're changing the minutes. Great. Would someone like to make the motion to approve the amended minutes from the September 30th public hearing?
I move that we approve them.
So moved by Jim Richards, is there a second? Seconded by Nancy Kane. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So those amended minutes are approved.
Thank you.
And so now we will move on to our next agenda item, actually our agenda item of recognitions and safety update. We do not have that at this time, but we will move to other recognitions and reports. And I am looking to hear from Michelle Vance with our therapy dog, who is here patiently waiting, so thank you. And Michelle is the principal of Beaver Meadow School.
Good evening. With me today is Ashley Barcelo, our school counselor, and this is Hazel. We're delighted that she's here tonight. I'm actually going to let Ashley answer a couple of questions that you have. Ashley is Hazel's handler.
Thank you for having me tonight, and I want to give a big shout out to my Beaver Meadow fan club in the back. Thank you so much. We have a lot of teachers, paraprofessionals, and other community members that are very supportive of this initiative. Hazel and I have been working since she was 8 weeks old, since the day that we got her. It was actually the day before Thanksgiving. And my husband and I are so blessed to have her a part of our family. We have done years of training. And actually over the summer, she and I had passed our therapy dog certification through Pet Partners, which is a nationally recognized program that animals go through. And it's not just dogs, it can be cats, it can be birds, it can be llamas. There's so many other different animals that can be utilized within the community. So I know, it seems interesting, right? Like how does that happen? But Hazel and I have done a variety of different desensitization trainings, and we've been working with kids since she was a puppy. And my husband is a firefighter and an EMT in Londonderry, and so we work a lot with the local fire departments and the EMTs and first responders that are diagnosed with PTSD in those communities. So we've done a lot of work together to get to this point, and we're blessed that she is who she is, and we're really excited to hear and see all the great things that she can do for our school community. So we're excited about this, and we're excited that you were able to take time to read through the policies that we proposed and to really consider this as an option for children. And I think it's a good point to move forward with. So we're excited about that.
Can I share a couple more things?
Yes. I don't know if board members have specific questions. I have a question if you can just describe what does she do with students as a therapy dog?
Yeah. I was also going to share just really quick, there has been a process that we certainly have gone through with not only educating our school community, but also the students. There have been surveys. We have spoken with medical personnel, with families of students that do have dog allergies and addressed all of those pieces. So I just kind of wanted to also put that out there. And then I'll hand this over to Ashley, who will share some of the goals that we have for Hazel if she's able to join our Beaver Meadow School staff.
Thank you. So data and research has suggested that animals do improve a variety of different mental health issues, cognitive, social, emotionally, and academically, behaviorally, that animals improve I mean, just about everything. Who doesn't like to see a dog and that friendly face that is non-judgmental and always caring and always accepting? And that's what I think we strive for, definitely at Beaver Meadow School, but in our district in general. So Hazel would be working with a variety of students. She would be doing individual counseling sessions with myself. She would be working in groups at the Tier 2 level, at the universal level, and then as well to work with our Title I staff and our literacy coordinator to improve reading scores. And so we have fancy I Read with Hazel bookmarks made all ready to go. So when the students have a chance to read with Hazel, read to Hazel, they will get a bookmark and they can have that with them at all times. So I think overall, we're really looking to see the culture shift and also to improve academic and behavior data that we work really hard to do now, but with the help of Hazel, I think it'll be more successful.
And Hazel was really well behaved and really
Thank you.
outstanding. And I'm very happy that she's at Beaver Meadow, which is the school that my kids went to. But I want to ask you, will there be opportunities for the other schools to gain information from this program and to maybe have an experience and interact with either Hazel or another animal that's related to them? And how will we bring the rest of the school district in?
That's a great question. I'm hoping to be able to utilize her on all levels, whether it's elementary, middle, or high, to support times of crisis and to support, you know, whatever it may need, whatever the students may need at that time, whether it's tragedy or not. So I'm hoping to pilot this for the district. As you know, we've written the school board policy in conjunction with our team, and I appreciate that very much. And I think that if this goes well and is successful, that I would love to see that therapy animals are available to all students at all levels. So that's the goal.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yep. Can you explain again how you manage kids who are allergic to dogs? Like, I'm terribly allergic to dogs.
Yes.
Therapy dog would not help me.
That's a good question. So we do know that people, students, children, staff members are allergic to dogs. So the way that we're going to manage that is Hazel is consistently groomed, and that's a large part of it. She is not hypoallergenic, and she does shed, and she does shed a lot. So we will also require and ask a lot of our custodial staff to make sure that our buildings are clean like they always are, but then to also limit exposure to those students and to get consent by their parents or guardians to make sure that they're able to come in contact with her. We would never expose a student to Hazel or bring them into their space, like a classroom, if it impacted their health. So all of those things, we would have to be strategic about building placement, about where she could go in the building, and then what that would look like for our school community. So we're really hoping to work with those parents because we have a lot of kiddos that are allergic that can still come in contact with dogs, but we'll have to manage their symptoms, and we never want to risk anyone's health. So it'll be work with the parents and guardians to make sure that they get what they need.
It's great that that's considered. The allergies with kids can be really troubling to parents, animal allergies, food allergies.
Yes.
So in something that's so obviously helpful, it's just good to acknowledge those kids and let the parents have a big active part in that. So that
Sure. I agree. Thank you.
We met with one parent who had some great concerns because her child certainly has more than one type of allergy, and she didn't want her daughter to be excluded in any way, shape, or form. And so we had a very proactive conversation with her. Also, we have a staff member, so we certainly don't want to jeopardize anyone's health at all. So it's be extremely strategic, but the student that is extremely allergic can't wait for Hazel to come. And the mother and the nurse are in contact about that to make sure that it's done safely and healthy.
I just think it's important to recognize we've come so far with things like peanut allergies, which can, turn into anaphylaxis. And so I think that we've really done a good job of being sensitive to the needs of the students. So yeah, it's good.
So I would be remiss if I didn't say that I have a connection. My wife works at Beaver Meadow School, and she has been saying to me, Tom, you've got to get this program in front of your board and get this going. She sees daily the benefits of these, that the kids get from being with your puppy. So that's one plug, and she wanted to be here tonight. She couldn't make it. The other is that when we talked about this at our meeting earlier to move this forward to the full board, Donna Pally provided us with research, and the research clearly, in the ones that we saw, really were convincing that kids benefit with their reading skills, their social skills, their language skills, gross motor skills. It's incredible what therapy dogs can do, what therapy ponies too, I guess, right? Can do with kids and for kids. So we're pretty excited.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you for working on the policy. So when we do our report on the Communications and Policy Committee, we'll be talking a little bit about that, which is coming forward for its first reading today, and we can answer any questions. So you worked on this policy and bringing it together, is that right?
So I drafted a policy that I worked in conjunction with Dunbarton Elementary School. I went to observe their special ed coordinator there, who has a certified therapy dog, and she taught me a lot and gave me a lot of great advice. And so I had taken a version of their policy and drafted one to present to Michelle and to Donna. And then they had manipulated that to best fit the needs of the district. So that's kind of how it developed.
That's great. I mean, and again, to give a preview of the policy, it's on pages 40 to 42 of the board book, and it draws the distinction between a therapy dog and a service dog. Therapy dog would be for the benefit of basically all the students who are able to access that, and as opposed to a service animal that is specifically assigned to a person with disabilities. And then this policy has standards, and it also has a form that could be used to make a request to use a therapy dog in school. So covers a lot of ground. Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Hazel, for doing such a good job during a long meeting.
We appreciate your time this evening, and we look forward to hearing back from you regarding this pilot. We would like to be able to move forward as quickly as possible.
Great.
Thank you to benefit our students.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'd also like to thank you for approving our gift. The ground on the playground was broken today for our raptor. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you.
Okay, so next on our agenda is personnel, and the first item on the agenda is the interim superintendent nomination, and so we thought it would be helpful to give Dr. Bass the opportunity to speak briefly, and Board Member Chuck Crush would like to introduce him first.
It's hard to follow Hazel. I don't know if anybody can. So I would like to have the privilege of introducing Dr. Frank Bass, who has an extensive educational background as a teacher, a principal, and an enrichment coordinator, assistant superintendent, and a superintendent for over 25 years. And that's all wonderful. But what I'd like to talk about even more is some things he said when he met with us in the interview process, some of his values. And I know he's going to have the opportunity to speak in a few minutes, but I want to just tell you our impression, or my impression, I think our overall impression as a board. Certainly communication to parents, to students, to staff, and not only communication, but follow through and timely resolution. He talks a lot about values related to policies and procedures, and use common sense and sound judgment. Stresses learning and knowledge. Certainly, he is a seasoned leader who has managed in multiple environments with some challenging situations that he's managed through with professionalism and courtesy and responsiveness. Look, I think he will assist us in this long journey ahead in regaining trust. And that's one reason I feel the privilege to introduce him. And I do agree with Kate, who said that we can do it together. And I think he really embraces the values of community and cooperation. So it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Bass.
Thank you. I do have some prepared remarks tonight, but after what I heard, I have to take a breath and pause. I mean, the depth of your pain, your fear, your sense of abandonment, your wonder about what's going to happen next, your feeling of anger and frustration, and wondering where the leaders are that are supposed to be here to help you. I felt that. I mean, I've read the newspaper articles and I've talked to people, but I never would have gotten the depth of what I heard tonight by not being here. So I thank you for that. And clearly, we have a lot of work to do. And I think as one person brought up earlier, you know, we don't have the teachers and the students trusting us and believing in us. We're dead in the water. Someone else brought up the issue of our policies and procedures. That's great. We have to have those. I'm a firm believer in that. But all the policies in the world aren't going to do any good if you don't have teachers and students and community members who are willing to come forward and say, hey, something's not right here and we need to address that. So yes, things have gone in a way that I think are going to bring us back to where we need to be. I think you're seeing and hearing from the board and from others about what work needs to be done and has started to begin to be done. But obviously a lot more has to be done. And hopefully I can help to bring that resolution forward with you and for you. But let me read some remarks that I prepared, because I do want to give you a little idea of who I am and kind of how I go about doing things. I think as Chuck pointed out, I do like to communicate and coordinate as much as I can. You will not find me in the office very often unless you call and ask to set up an appointment with me. You'll find me in the buildings, in the schools, in the schoolyards, in the lunchrooms, in the classrooms. I'm a real firm believer in quality classroom instruction and the ways in which we can make that as good as possible for all students, not just the best and the brightest or those that need a little bit of extra help. But I'm getting carried away, so let me go on with my prepared remarks if I could. Thank you to the Concord School Board for the opportunity to serve as your interim superintendent for the remainder of the 2019 school year. My #1 goal is to restore the faith and trust in school district leadership and to ensure that parents, staff, and students are heard. In short, plans need to be put in place to resolve issues and concerns in a full and complete manner. In order to be abreast of all that's going on in our schools on a daily basis, I plan to spend a significant amount of my time in the schools, in classes, hallways, and lunchrooms. And until the high school principal situation is resolved, I will spend a couple of hours every day that I'm here in that building, working in tandem with the assistant principals, staff, and students to cultivate an ethos of trust and support and maintain prompt and clear communication channels to all concerned. To that end, any parent who wants to see me, either about past events or something looming on the horizon, or simply just to stop by and say hi, my door is always open. Just call and make an appointment. Any emails or phone calls I receive will be returned within 24 hours. Even if just to say, I got your message and we'll get back to you shortly. Nothing more frustrating than not hearing and wondering, was it lost in cyberspace? more frustrating than, lost in cyberspace. Was it too busy to get back to me? Or worse, maybe he just doesn't care. So I've been on the other side of that. I know how you feel. It's really important to get back to people in a timely manner. The staff and student body are the lifeblood of our schools. My goal is to develop a pervasive culture of caring, consideration, and collaboration, whereby there is an inveterate understanding on the part of both teachers and students that those responsible for their safety and welfare know who they are, that's all individual students, care about them, and esteem them to become valued contributing members of our school community. If you can do that in each and every classroom, in each and every building, then you begin to build back the trust and the faith and the understanding that hopefully our students and staff will have in the leadership here. Communication, follow through, and resolution, and it won't always be to the satisfaction of all. I can guarantee you that. It needs to be our top priority in the next few weeks and months. And to that end, as much as possible and within reason, the superintendent and assistant superintendent need to be aware of all issues and concerns that bubble up within our schools or amidst any of the ongoing school-sponsored events occurring on or off campus. We have to know what's going on. If we don't know about it, we can't respond to it. So please, I'm encouraging you to bring forth the issues to us and give us an opportunity to try and redress them. Policies and procedures are an important and legally binding part of our school governance, and we must make every effort to ensure that extant policies are up to date and actually address what they purport to do. However, all the best policies and procedures in the world are worthless if we don't administer common sense and sound judgment in dealing with our staff and students. Certification is a state requirement. All staff need to be duly certified within the time frames established by the state. It is the superintendent's responsibility to ensure all staff are fully and completely certified each and every year. Now, I understand that the school board, administration, as well as the state DOE have spearheaded this effort, and so hopefully we're well on our way to making sure that's the case. But I will certainly double check with DOE. I know those folks pretty well, and be certain that we get all of this done in a timely manner. Lastly, we're about educating our youth and instilling a pride and ownership in the community values and ideals that define who we are in Concord, New Hampshire. To that end, we must never lose sight of the educational objectives of our schools, and as so elegantly captured in the school district mission statement, by the way, one of the best I've ever read. Kudos to whoever put that together. That's really well done. Statement, the K through 12 experience is more than a sum total of acquired knowledge and learning, but a lively and spirited investigation into the mysteries of our natural world and the human condition of our sentient beings, who we are, where we've been, where we hope to go, both as individuals and as society. In short, how do we best cultivate an ethos of trust and value, pride and ownership, and care and consideration, such that students and staff alike engender a spirit of inquiring imagination where the curriculum serves merely as a springboard to greater understandings and connections, that robust exchange of ideas which discovers truth out of a multitude of tongues rather than through any kind of authoritative selection. That's a quote from Keeshan versus Board of Regents, a Supreme Court case. Ideally, one looks to generate a series of content-rich milieus that are grade appropriate, whereby teachers serve more as facilitators and guides, allowing students to navigate their way in search of pathways to optimal learning that works best for them. Every student is different. They all have individual attitudes, values, and opportunities in which they try to acquire new knowledge and to learn, and we need to be aware of that as much as possible. In short, multiple approaches to problem solving really should be one of our greatest strengths as we move forward looking at Concord schools and the educational program that we deliver here. From the moment the 5-year-old child crosses our threshold to some 12 years later when they graduate, we have responsibility for their care, their nurturance, their safety, and well-being. In loco parentis means just that. We are the parent and need to act accordingly. And that is exactly what I strive to do over these next several months. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Dr. Best, and welcome.
Thank you.
So next we'll look to Larry Prince. We have some staff nominations and coach nominations that we need to approve. And I know you need the microphone, so thank you, Matt.
I'm very happy to present to you the nomination for interim superintendent, Franklin Bass. He'll be paid at a daily rate of $750. He's going to be working part-time 3 days a week, and this is a one-year-only position. So I would bring forward his nomination for your approval.
Great, thank you. And I believe we already voted on his nomination last week, so it is in effect, it's contingent on a number of contingencies. So again, as I said earlier, our expectation is that Dr. Bass will start work on Thursday.
All right, okay. Next, I have 2 teacher nominations. Donna Hillier is a special education teacher at Concord High. She's on the B1 scale at 44,102. And Diana Matzo, a science teacher at Concord High. She's at a master's step 1 at 48,512.
Any board members have any questions about these 2 teacher nominations? Yep.
So the buzzword right now, and rightly so, is certification, Larry. So if you would, just explain to the public out here what educational intern license Alt 4 means.
The Department of Education allows us to hire folks as teachers with what they call a statement of eligibility. And what that does is tell them that they are going to earn working toward their certification. In order to do that, they're then given an educational intern license. And Alt 4 is a plan to become certified. That Alt 4 expires in June of 2022, so they have 3 years to become certified. So that is a process, and the Department of Ed does allow us to have these teachers in place and be on the teacher scale during that time. And they have both earned their intern license.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on the teacher nominations? So seeing none, is there a motion to approve those nominations? So moved by Barb Higgins.
Second.
Seconded by Chuck. I saw Chuck before I heard Tom, so I'll go with Chuck.
We can argue.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the teacher nominations are approved.
Thank you. And then we have winter coach nominations. These folks that I read to you are new to their coaching to this sport. So Ryan Daniels as the girls indoor track co-coach with a stipend of $1,820. Pia Shea, an assistant alpine ski coach at Concord High with a stipend of $1,713. William Chabanel, a wrestling head coach at middle school at $2,570. Robert Darrell, girls basketball A coach at Runlet with a stipend of $2,570. Cassidy Emerson, a girls basketball B coach at Runlet Middle School with a stipend of $2,142. Melissa Foley, boys basketball A co-coach at the Runlet Middle School at $1,285. And Adam Tuttle, boys basketball A co-coach at Runlet at $1,285. The next sheet in your packet is an Excel sheet that contains the list of everyone who is returning to an existing coaching position. So I think in the past you've approved the new ones and then the returning ones separately, or you certainly can approve them all at once, but that is being presented to you as well.
Great, thank you, Larry. So why don't we look first at the new nominations? Are there any questions on any of the newly nominated winter coaches? So seeing none, is there a motion to approve the new coaches?
So moved.
Moved by Nancy.
I'll second.
Seconded by Barb. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the new coaches are approved. Are there any questions about the full slate of returning coaches? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the full slate of coaches for winter sports?
I'll move it.
Moved by Barb,
I'll second.
seconded by Jim. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? So the winter coaches are approved.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Larry. And I believe our next item is the Communications and Policy Report. The Communications and Policy Committee met on October 21st, and the minutes from that meeting are on pages 32 through 35. There were three main policies that we looked at during that meeting. First was the Health Procedures Manual. So under Concord School District Policy 531, the manual is in effect and it's periodically reviewed by the board. So we went through that review to look at revisions that had been suggested by the district's school physician, Dr. Todd Borrett, in collaboration with the district nurses. And so we really went through in some detail, page by page, to look at that manual, and I think we're bringing it forward for the board to vote on approval of the changes. There were some questions that board members asked, and I think Donna Pally has answers to some of those questions. Donna, do you want to speak to that?
There were a number of questions, and we sought answers from the nurses and from Dr. Porrett. So I will go through those. One of them had to do with refrigerators. And the answer is yes, they have refrigerators. The refrigerators themselves don't lock, but the offices lock. And so they're always locked when the nurse is not present. They actually, most of them report that there aren't that many medications that they refrigerate anymore. Disinfectant cleaners, there was a question about that, and that is exactly what they meant to say, appropriate disinfectant cleaner. All schools in the district have a concentrated hospital-grade disinfectant, which the custodians provide. Ask questions, let me know if you have further questions about those. Cough drops, there were questions about cough drops, and that varies from elementary to middle to high school. Middle and high school students generally can carry their own cough drops, but not elementary students, some of whose parents worry about choking risks and dye allergies. So they must seek them from the nurse's office. Narcan was a little bit more complicated, and the nurses don't currently have unexpired supplies of Narcan, so they had originally been given Narcan. I think they were part of a free program, but that has expired, as has the medication itself. And so there's going to be, Dr. Porrett has suggested a couple of potential programs that would provide Narcan for free, so we need to look into those programs that he's recommended. He noted that he understands why some of the school nurses were concerned, and that has to do with the reaction, apparently, that individuals can have after receiving Narcan, where there can be some aggression or concerns, behavioral concerns, and so there's some concern in that regard. But it seems that there's going to be a need for more training and conversation about Narcan. Whether the school physician would give physical exams for high school students, yes, for students who do not have a PCP. Choking, the procedures for choking, conscious and choking unconscious, Dr. Porrett agreed that call 911 immediately was a good suggestion, although he suggested send someone to call 911 would be a better way to say that. So he was going to recommend that
That was a good idea.
For that piece. And I think that's all those are all the answers. Thank you, Donna. So those suggested changes, the additional changes, are they reflected in the version that we have for board members to review? Great, thank you. Are there other questions? Yep.
Yeah, I just have one question.
Excuse me.
Somewhat related, do we keep narcotics in the nurse's office? Like, do we have a narcotic log, or do we not keep narcotics, or?
I'm not aware that we do. I can ask that question.
All right, I'd just be curious, because it's a whole separate.
Yeah, there was nothing.
Yeah. I wouldn't imagine we would, but I was just curious. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions on the health procedures manual or discussion of that? So seeing none, I guess I'll make a motion. The committee voted to recommend that the full board concur with the recommended changes to the health procedures manual. So I'll make that motion that the full board concur with the recommended changes in accordance with policy 531. Is there a second?
Second.
So I moved, seconded by Barb. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So the recommended changes are approved. So next, there was discussion of two policies related to animals in schools. The first was policy 576, which relates to service animals. And this was based on a New Hampshire School Board Association policy. Service animals are specifically defined under the Americans with Disabilities Act as animals that have been trained to perform a service for an individual with a disability. And so, distinct from the therapy dog policy and presentation that we heard earlier today, the work or task of the service is directly related to the individual's disability. The school is not responsible for the animal, although a staff member may provide support to help a child take the animal outside, for example, to relieve itself, and it's the student's parents that are liable for any damage or injuries caused by the animal. The potential policy also has a provision for an animal that is not specifically defined as a service animal to be incorporated as part of a special education student's IEP, and so that is detailed in the policy. So the way our policy procedure works is policies that have been moved forward by the Communications Policy Committee go to first reading before the board and then are adopted on second reading. So this is the first reading for this particular policy. So we would not be bringing it forward, but we could talk and see if there are any questions that any board members have about this policy. The policy is on page 36 through 39. Are there any questions about the service animals in schools policy? Okay, so we'll consider that for a vote at our next meeting. Then the next policy that we discussed, as we heard when we met Hazel, is policy 790, therapy dogs. There's not a sample policy from the New Hampshire School Boards Association, but there was a policy that was brought forward and created based on several other school districts' policies, and really it's a combination of the two. So as mentioned earlier, there are some criteria for what a therapy dog would need to conform with, and then there's also a form that we didn't look at during our meeting, but it's on page 42. It was developed afterwards, and it would be a form that could be used to request to use a therapy dog in the schools. So I guess my only question on this is the request from Principal Vance to move forward as quickly as possible with Hazel. I suppose the committee could, the board could consider waiving the first reading if we wanted to move forward quickly with this policy to enable that pilot project to go forward immediately. I haven't looked up yet, and maybe one of the administrators can look for me at what our procedure is for waiving the first reading, if that's something that board members would like to do. So I'd open up the discussion on that question, as well as on any questions about that policy.
I would move that we
move forward as quickly as possible with this policy. I know that we've had similar grant pilots that have been very successful, like here at Millbrook School, bringing a therapy dog in through a grant. So I think that if we can get this off the ground, I would be definitely in favor of that. And I don't know what the policy is, but I would move, based on our policy and procedure, that we waive the second reading and approve this policy tonight.
Go ahead, Barb. I agree.
Jack or Donna, I didn't have time to look it up. It looks like we're looking it up right now. I think there is a process. We have done it before. I just don't remember exactly. I didn't have the opportunity to look it up. So it's waiving the first reading.
Any person may request an exception to any school board policy or the application of same. Well, that's for the letter. We don't want to do that.
I don't know which policy it is, Jenny, but you simply vote to waive your process.
Okay. Well, why don't we just do that? Thank you, Lyndon. And I think that was the motion
to waive
that Pam made. So Pam made the motion to waive our process of 2 readings, such as to allow us to adopt the policy tonight. So that's been moved by Pam.
Seconded by Barb.
Seconded by Barb. And is there any discussion, were there any concerns or questions about the policy? We did talk about it a little bit when Hazel was here. I know, Barb, you had raised questions about allergies. Do you think that that issue is sufficiently covered?
Yeah, they are really solid on it.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of communication, so I don't feel like we need to pull back at all.
Great. And again, as we've done in the past, if it turns out that there's a problem, we can go back and modify the policy, but having it in place enables us to have a standard that's in place and let the program go forward. So any further discussion on the motion to waive? Seeing none, all in favor of waiving the first reading and proceeding straight to the second reading, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so let me move that the board adopt policy 790, therapy dogs, as it is presented in the board book.
Second.
So seconded by Pam. Any discussion?
Just that if, because this is brand new, if we find out in January that we need to adjust, that we can have an opportunity to come back and revisit based on our pilot program.
Yes, absolutely. We've been doing a lot of revising of policies, and we would continue to. Yes, Pam?
I would also think it would be really great if at the end of the year, we could get Hazel back for an update on how it went, because it's always nice to hear the data on successful programming in our school district. So.
Great. Any further discussion on policy 790, therapy dogs? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting that policy, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we have adopted policy 790. And then the last piece of our Communications and Policy Committee meeting is to note that at its next meeting, the committee will go back to the focus on the policies relating to student safety, and specifically looking at sexual harassment and staff-student relations. And we also hope to look at the restraint and seclusion policy and potentially the special education manual. Those are all high priorities for this policy committee. So it has a lot of work that we're doing. And as mentioned earlier, the staff-student relations policy, we really had wanted to wait to get input from students before we brought that forward to the committee again, as well as from staff, and that work is happening. Donna, did you want to give any more detail? I know that you had given me some information on that process as it's going on. Do you have a mic or no?
I do.
Yeah.
At the high school?
At the high school, and then also with the staff. Yep.
Yes, so the high school has a process they've established for working through the advisory program to reach students. And it's something that we talked about, Gavin and Alice and I, along with one of our assistants on Friday this week. So yes, they're planning to raise lots of voices, and we're going to start with that one policy. We thought that would be a great place to begin, and would be something that students could really find some connections with and provide some information on. And then there's actually a meeting tomorrow of the school principals, and we're talking about a process for gaining staff input on that exact same thing. So, and that's going to be happening most likely at the building level in those school buildings. But we're reaching for that November 20th date. So in the next few weeks, we're going to be busy having folks look at those.
Great. Thank you, Donna. And the very last piece is we did get a little bit of feedback on the changes that had been made at the last board meeting on policies 432 and 537, reporting child abuse and neglect. That was the change that we made to avoid redundant reports to the police department and DCYF, and it sounds like that was favorably received by those agencies, which is great. Okay, so next agenda item is an update on the Finance Committee meeting. I'll turn that over to Tom Cordo.
Some of this information is redundant because we talked about, this is going to report back on some of the things that we've already spoken about in our previous minutes, but I'll try to hit the highlights. Jack Dunn does such a great job at our Finance Committee meetings that I feel like if I don't do a very good job summarizing the meeting, that I'm shortchanging him. So my commitment is to make sure I'm very careful. So the meeting was to provide additional information regarding reviewing and finalizing our fiscal 19 and fiscal 20 budgets in advance of our full board meeting on October 28th, which we've already reported about. We review the history of budget finalization meetings for 19 and for 20, and certain recommendations and considerations as well as a motion, which we did do. There were three really big components that happened in this particular meeting. One was the Medicaid billing component, which I'll explain in a second as well as I can. The tax rate, which was good news, and then our future considerations of expenditures. So with regard to Medicaid billing, and I don't profess to know a great deal about it, so I'm going to summarize what I can, and if I miss a few things, Donna, I'm sure will help in. Unless, Donna, you want to do that from the get-go? Okay, I'll give it a shot. So for a very long time, the Concord School District and others have been able to bill Medicaid for services that are in our youngsters' IEPs that have been duly documented that they need to have. Just very recently, Medicaid and the feds came out and said, well, we're going to change that. We're not going to let you do it the same way that you have been doing it. There are doctors who typically had been giving blessings in IEPs for certain services, guidance counselors, and others. And the feds are saying, you can't do that anymore. What that means to Concord School District right now is that we projected revenue of $1,125,000 in Medicaid reimbursement. And because of this and these particular things that are happening with Medicaid and the feds right now, we are projecting $6,250. That is a tremendous hit to our budget. That's not to say, there's two important things that you need to know about that. One is that be assured that no IEP services are going to be affected because of this. This is not going to affect how we deal with our youngsters who experience special needs. It is a hit, no question about it. We are efforting to try and figure out what the new rulings are all about and how can we comply in our district the way we had been, or a lot of the way we had been, so that we can begin to get some of that Medicaid billing back again. I'm told that it's on February 24th will be the final date. I know that our Director of Special Ed has been attending meetings regarding all of these rule changes There are other districts who are feeling the same pinch, and everybody is trying to figure out what are the feds doing to us, and how can we get back to where we were. So it's a story that's open right now, and we'll keep you updated. The other important part from this particular meeting that you should know about, and it's been explained already, is that our tax rate was projected at $15.77 per thousand, or a 1.48% increase, which in and of itself, in the years that I've been on the board, which is about 9 or 8, is a pretty good rate. However, it came in at 15.31, or minus 1.48%, which is even better news. We did find there's other, I'm kind of skipping here now. The state has decided to pay in to us for our steam. I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, we had to do this trip, or was it just last year?
It was a couple of years ago.
That we had to pay a ton of money to convert our schools that were operating under Concord steam to natural gas for our heat and hot water. And finally, through the efforts of a number of folks at the state, we have been able to recoup $1 million of that. It's a $1 million one-year holiday, so to speak. We'll get that, and that will go back into our budget to be divided and go into certain spots. Let me see what else here. And then I talked about future considerations, and Jack, if I didn't hit all of those highlights of your process, you should jump in.
You had Medicaid, the million, and the tax rate.
Okay.
All right.
So the committee voted 4-0 to recommend to the full board to adopt the following change to the fiscal year 20 budget for the purpose of appropriating the additional unreserved fund balance funds, one-time state revenue for steam to gas, that was the $1 million that I was talking about, and to transfer to trust funds. This would bring the total budget from to $91,583,448, with a general fund of $86,135,367, and to amend the budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 as approved on March 27th, inclusive of the following programs, and then we divide out the money that way. Basically, we continue to put into our trust funds so that money will be there when this district needs it. And a prime example would be when we move forward, if we move forward on rebuilding or building a new Runlet Middle School. As was happened with the elementary schools, there wasn't a huge tax hit because there were trust funds that were put into place. We're continuing that action so that when and if we move forward with Runlet Middle School, there will not be those huge tax hits. Future considerations, just to name a couple. There's always utilities, electrical and natural gas, snow removal. That's a moving target every year. We're budgeting $52,000 over in fiscal year 19. Out-of-district tuition and transportation, homeless transportation, transfer to facilities renovation trust, which I talked about. We've had some equipment failures. There's dishwashers at both Broken Ground and Krista McCalla, refrigerators at Runlet Middle School and Broken Ground and others. And we're not talking about your basic $800 or $900 refrigerators and dishwashers. We're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. So we've got the budget in our sights. We're going to begin that process in a couple of months. Sorry to be so long-winded. needed to know.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Jack. And this is an incredibly important function of the board, so it's really important for us to be hearing and talking about it. So I appreciate that. And we did really well with the budget this year, so that is fantastic. So our next item is other business, preparing for the canvass of the vote. And Lyndon, are you the one who's going to speak to this? Or someone else? So tomorrow is election day, and typically what happens is immediately after the vote is reported, Lyndon calls all of the board members to gain their acceptance for the canvass of the vote. So I think this is on the agenda just to confirm that that's the process that will follow this year. Did I miss anything?
You should probably take a vote to accept the canvass of the vote by telephone.
Okay, that sounds good. So Lyndon is reminding us that we typically vote to accept the canvass of the vote by telephone. So would someone like to make that motion? So
I'll make a motion, we accept the canvass of the vote via the utilization of the telephone.
I'll second that.
All right, moved by Chuck, seconded by Barb, and that telephone call will occur on Wednesday from Lyndon. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we will have the canvass of the vote, and thank you, Lyndon. So next agenda item is the proposed calendar of meetings. Donna, are you able to talk about our proposed calendar?
It's on, okay. And we're looking at November, so obviously elections tomorrow and the canvass of the vote, as you just discussed. There'll be a 6 o'clock negotiations meeting. That is not a public meeting. We will have an instructional committee meeting on the 13th at 5:30. That's Wednesday the 13th. And we will be looking at a proposed 2020-2021 school year calendar. And we will hear from so far the science department about 2 new proposed courses. On the 18th, Monday, 5 o'clock, the executive committee will meet, followed by a capital facilities meeting. On the 20th, communication and policy will meet. We've talked about that, about a couple different policies that will be coming up then. We have Thanksgiving recess. We also, during that week and into the next, have parent-teacher conferences going on. Into December, the full board will meet on the 2nd at 7 o'clock. City and Community Relations at 5:30 p.m. The executive meeting on the 16th at 5. Communications and Policy at 5:30. Instructional again on the 18th. We'll be doing our full enrollment report on December 18th for the board. Any thoughts, changes, revisions, additions?
Looks good.
Okay.
Thank you, Donna. So next agenda item is public comment on any subject. So for those of you who waited, thank you. And I know there were a couple of people who did want to speak during this second public comment period. So Matt, we can do the 5-minute limit again if that's, if you're able to.
Do I get another
Thank
5
you.
minutes, please?
We'll give you another 5 minutes.
I'll
Dan.
keep it to 5. All right, thank you. It's a long night, and I appreciate, again, all the information we've gotten tonight. And I think Superintendent Bass, who I think is interim Superintendent Bass, who I think is left now, I think that we'll find a community that's welcoming to him and that is hungry for strong and effective leadership, so I'm excited to work with him, and I think everyone is. But as far as I understand, he's working 3 days a week, is that right? So he's got a tall task. He's got a lot ahead of him. And I think that one of the things that really became even more clear to me tonight than I had even realized is some of the systemic failures and challenges that are continuing. When you hear a Concord High parent say, I'm hearing 2 different things from 2 assistant superintendents, or where you hear a mom of a student in Harry Young's room who says, this hit the fan, and still nobody stepped in and said, we've got to make sure to support the kids that are losing their education teacher. That's scary to me, and it shows just how many systemic failures there are still potentially continuing. So I think a couple of points I'll just go through that I don't think were fully addressed tonight, but I want to make sure don't get lost in the shuffle, is that I'm not sure the community has faith that the implementation recommendations in report number 2 can be implemented and monitored internally. I really think the board should strongly consider, and maybe this is the superintendent, hiring an independent compliance officer, similar to what St. Paul's has done, to really look at all these, whatever strategic plan happens, which I assume will involve community members, nonprofits in the community. It won't just be an internal strategic plan. I think that would be a big mistake.
That is the point.
That is, good, thank you, Jenny, thank you. So anyway, but then how does that get implemented? And is there a timeline? And is anyone checking in to see if these things are happening? Because I can say that even something like notification or teaching students how to report and making sure they know at this point how to report. My son is primarily nonverbal. And I've asked him, he's never really gotten information. I think there was one loudspeaker announcement about how to report. The families of students who have communication challenges should be notified. This is how we are helping to make sure your son and your children knows how to report. We have not got any communication. So I think there's still these really big existing gaps. So I think an external compliance officer is something I hope the board considers. Do we currently have an internal, I'm sorry, were you saying something? No. Do we currently have an internal or external investigator? That was something that Attorney Perkins mentioned in her report. Is there anybody in the district that serves that role? Okay, so that's a gap. If that's not happening, that's something that Attorney Perkins made sure to make good. Do we currently have a Title IX coordinator in the district? Who is it?
Bob Belmont.
Okay, Bob, so we have time. And were they involved in the policy work, or they'll be involved in the policy work going forward, I assume, around this?
So again, all of these are great questions.
Sure.
And that is exactly the reason that the board voted tonight to have the administration prepare a draft strategic plan. They will be preparing that with input from the community, and it will include timelines, measurable goals, all of that. That's exactly the work that we're really excited to
Great,
commence.
okay.
So we're hoping that you'll be participating in that process.
Sure.
Because all of this input is going to be useful.
Great, okay. And then the other piece that I don't think we addressed explicitly today was the work that was being done with the memorandum of understanding between the school district and the police department. There were some really good suggestions going around, some good discussions. I'd hate to see that stop in its tracks. I don't know if you have any updates on that
It's
specifically.
ongoing. Those conversations have been occurring, and there will be further meetings that we're going to bring Dr. Bass into.
Okay. Great, let's see. I think those are the main points I wanted to make. I really appreciate the energy that I know will happen beyond this night to really look through all the questions we asked, the additional questions that came up, and I think I've heard something about a Q&A that's going to be published. Again, I just urge you transparency, and I think you've already heard the message of we need to know the past as well. We can't move on until we understand the past. So thank you, everybody. Yeah.
I promise I'll be brief. And I wasn't ignoring you last time. I just actually didn't see your hand signal. A couple of things came to me as I was just listening to Dan. Jennifer, you mentioned twice, once earlier and just now to Dan, that they will be with the interim superintendent on board and others involved. There will be policy written and new directives, and you specifically said both times with community input. So I'm wondering, how will community input be gathered? How will community even know that their input is not only requested but welcome? How will that process occur?
So just a brief response, but I think obviously it's going to be a long process. Last summer, we began some really great policy work where we actually sat at tables with members of the community, with facilitators who had different expertise. We looked at a number of policies. Now that we have Investigator Perkins' recommendations, which are very specific to the Concord School District, I think it really gives us an opportunity to create a strategic plan to move forward with all of that work in the manner that we were doing it last summer, but that is directed specifically at addressing those recommendations that I think will be incredibly beneficial and valuable. And so that's why the board has asked for a plan. So the plan, I think it'll come in draft form at the December meeting, but even in the planning process, it will incorporate input from community members. But I think that the implementation of the plan will also have very specific processes for incorporating community members. So all of those are great questions.
Will those meetings be posted,
I mean, again, that's why we want the plan, because we want there to be accountability. We want there to be the ability for people who might be interested to know how they might participate. And I know I've talked a little bit with Donna, but we want to incorporate Dr. Bass's input, so that's why we don't have specifics yet. But we really want to make sure that we get that so that everybody understands exactly how we're approaching this.
Right, that makes perfect sense. And I just reiterate a little of what I said earlier and what almost everyone has addressed who's spoken. The more you can put out publicly for all of us whom you represent, the more that we will together begin to creep our way toward that transparency and trust, and regain both of those. The other thing that came to me was when it was, again, something Dan mentioned that was brought up earlier, that it is extremely important to teach, educate, train students, staff, teachers, everyone involved with the school district as to how to report, whatever it happens to be. But beyond that, and that's what I was thinking as I was sitting there, it would also be, as you do that, or as you come to the ways in which that will take place, I think it would be not only beneficial, but necessary to also bring those same things to the public. Because as adults, we are all mandated reporters by law. That's not an if, which makes so much of what has happened even more abhorrent. But the general public, those of us like myself who do not have children, I do have grandchildren, but all of us here in Concord who are concerned about, or parents from other communities who are involved in the Concord School District in one manner or another, should all be made aware of those same mechanisms for reporting. If your child comes home and says something, and you're either a parent who's new to this or whatever the circumstances are, who do you turn to? You call your child's teacher? You've never met the person, let's say. You call the school principal, you know that person even less. Who do you call? That needs to be put out there for everyone, whether they have children or not in the district, whether they come from Concord or not. So I think that would be one more thing to add to your to-do list.
Thank you.
Thank you, and absolutely, I think, for me, looking at Investigator Perkins' recommendations, this whole notion of establishing a comprehensive protocol for responding to sexual misconduct concerns really resonated with the conversations that we've been having and kind of clicked it into focus. I think that we had a lot of discussions last summer about different pieces of the policies, but it felt a little bit diffuse, and I think her concept of having a Title IX coordinator who receives all allegations of boundary violations and sexual misconduct, and then training, just to have this uniformity of approach and to have a single person who is looking at all of these issues to ensure that there is uniformity, that there's a common standard, that there's a common understanding. I think that is really going to be one of the major goals of this process going forward. So I'm excited about it. I think other board members are also, they can speak for themselves. But yeah, thank you for commenting on that. Are there other public comments?
I don't even write my name down twice, do I? I'm a big roof follower, so it's like a... I think what I decided I wanted to actually come here today was what I'm going to talk about. I think what I saw on Friday, because I actually watched the board meeting on Friday, is I saw opportunity. We have an opportunity as we have this chance of change in leadership to maybe, this is maybe a good thing. I mean, I realize this is very painful, but change in leadership can be a very good thing. And I want to specifically talk about a group of students, the 16% of our population in Concord. Those are the students with disabilities. And I know you've heard the rumblings and you've heard the little rumbles, but the parents who have kids with students with disabilities are tired. They're frustrated that their IEPs aren't being implemented correctly. It's like a constant barrage of over and over and over and over again. And I think as we get a chance of having a new superintendent, as we look forward to how we start looking for this new one we're going to hire in July, is look for somebody who's really willing to make that connection with those families that are frustrated, that are tired. We've been trying, the family's been trying for years to get a family-school partnership in the city. It's been a lot of resistance in the district. I think it's a great opportunity, not only to bridge the gap, but also to really make some change. And I really think this is a really good opportunity here. And I would love for it to be not the kids with student disabilities over here and everybody else over here. I want when we hire a new superintendent, it's going to be seen as a universal thing that they see that for everybody. And when I say that, I mean, I want it to be an all-encompassing thing. And we have wonderful teachers. We have wonderful students in our district. There's great stuff going on. My daughter, Abby, gets everything she does. My daughter actually doesn't have some negative experiences some families do, who can't be here because they are tired. They are frustrated. She's gotten everything she needs. Why can't everybody else have the same experience she gets? You know, but she's thriving in the high school, and she's having a wonderful experience. So, I mean, my whole thing is let's take this opportunity, and I'm going to try to come as many meetings as I can to speak to those parents that are too tired to come, who are exhausted, who get like silly little things that are mistakes. And it's not saying, I understand the whole paperwork and how things get forgotten, but we can make this work here. This is Concord. We can do better. That's it.
Thank you, and thank you for mentioning the process of searching for a permanent superintendent, because I think that also will be a really significant effort that we want to include the community in, and I do think it's an opportunity.
I'm Erin Sharkey, and I'm a parent here in Concord. And I'd like to know if the board is going to include the staff, the students, and the community in the process of hiring the new superintendent and principal of the high school, and how they're going to involve us in that, and so that we can make sure that everybody's as happy and compatible as can be.
Thank you, and we don't have you're talking about the permanent.
Yes.
The permanent. So, I mean, typically, we do have committees that involve a variety of different stakeholders, including for the high school students, staff, and, you know, others. So certainly this is something that we want to be really thoughtful about under the circumstances. We haven't delineated the process yet, as we just accepted Principal Siga's resignation today, but it's something that we really want to make sure that we have input from the community into. So thank you for raising that.
Okay, and I have one more question.
Yep.
I know you guys do budgeting stuff, and Ms. Pally stated stuff about chemicals, and it brought to my memory my middle school student, as well as my nieces and my nephews, have all stated that they now have responsibilities and duties in the dining room at the middle school of clearing trash and washing tables. They did state they don't have gloves for protecting themselves while they're cleaning those tables, and I was hoping that they could make those available if they're going to be putting their hands in chemicals, dirty buckets, flu season, cold season. Thank you.
I'm writing down about the gloves, so, sorry.
Using the balance of my time for one quick question. The principal, the interim principal of the high school, is that purely a superintendent's decision and responsibility, or will the board be playing an active role in hiring an interim superintendent for the high school? Interim principal, I'm sorry, for the high
It's a
school.
good question. We don't have an answer yet. I mean, typically, it would be it would be a process with a committee, I mean, certainly for a permanent person.
I'm asking about the
So I think,
interim.
but for the interim, I would expect that there will be some board input, but we do want to work with Dr. Bass on it as well.
So he'll be in the lead probably of
Yeah.
recruiting and funding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there other public comment on any topic?
I have an email. I was waiting for everyone that was here to speak, but I received an email from Diodene Batare, I hope I'm saying her name right, that she wanted me to read for public comment because she couldn't be here tonight. She wrote, "Families I have heard from too personally and assume there are others on the far side of Cranmore Ridge on Portsmouth Street are forced to drive their kids to school because there is no bus service, presumably because their homes fall within the safe routes to school map. However, the Portsmouth Street sidewalk ends at 165 Portsmouth Street, and parents don't want their children to walk along the portion of Portsmouth Street that does not have a sidewalk. There is barely a shoulder, and visibility is terrible, and traffic is fast and heavy. This is only compounded in winter." That's her personal statement, and I will speak to that as I don't think it was quite an issue before the opening of that new Chipotle plaza with Rap City. Since that has opened, Portsmouth Street has become a cut-through for Loudon Road, so you don't have to drive East Side Drive, and you can bypass a bunch of Loudon Road, and traffic is fast and heavy. So I'm not sure what the process for something like that would be, but I remember before I was on the board, there was talk about increasing walk zones, and I spoke about we can't have students walking across I-393, especially in the winter. I'm gonna make that same request, that if the city can't have sidewalks that students can walk on, they should not have to be forced to walk to school or have their parents drive them. We should be able to provide some kind of busing or so I'd just like to get that into the public comment and maybe start a dialogue for improving, the safe walking to schools. If you don't have a sidewalk, like, we shouldn't be having our kids walking down the street, especially in the winter. So that was comment by Diodene, and I'm going to kind of second her concerns and just say that I want to have that conversation, whoever might be the person to start that. Thanks.
Hi. Last public comment in response to that, and I will state my name, is Beth Richards, and I formerly served as the parent representative for the City of Concord and the school district when there was a Safe Routes to School task force. And I also served as a bicycle and pedestrian representative for the state. So to clarify this, I would ask the board, as you're looking to consider reinstating that task force for exactly these issues in many locations. The federal transportation bill supports Safe Routes to School differently. So the federal dollars and state dollars that come into the state are very different, but the needs have not changed. And the planning that Matt was working on that could roll up into the Capital Facilities Committee could be very helpful for situations like this. So just institutional memory.
Sometimes it's not just distance, oftentimes our bus routes are determined by distance. Sometimes the distance is the issue, so much as where they're walking. It seems like that.
And And sometimes we get sidewalks, there's a sidewalk on Westbourne Road.
Once in a
So
while.
that's a great topic. Thank you for raising it. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion to adjourn.
Moved by Chuck, seconded by Barb. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.